summer sun beat down relentlessly upon the asphalt of the Machus Red Fox restaurant parking lot in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. On that fateful afternoon in late July 1975, heat waves shimmered off the hoods of parked cars, creating a mirage that distorted reality and made the distant tree line dance like restless spirits. It was a day that would mark the beginning of one of the most enduring mysteries in American history, a chilling tale that haunts the collective memory of the nation. The air was thick not just with humidity, but with an unseen tension, a heavy blanket of dread that seemed to settle over the suburbs of Detroit. In this mundane setting, a legend was about to vanish into the ether, leaving behind only whispers and shadows. James Riddle Hoffa stood alone beside his green Pontiac Grandville, pacing anxiously as the minutes ticked by like the slow tolling of a funeral bell. He was a man of immense power and influence, a figure who had commanded the loyalty of millions within the international brotherhood of Teamsters. Yet in this moment, he was merely a solitary figure, exposed and vulnerable under the glare of the sun. He checked his watch repeatedly, his brow furrowed with a mixture of irritation and rising concern. The men he was scheduled to meet were late, and in his world tardiness was often a sign of disrespect or something far more sinister. The shadows of the nearby trees seemed to stretch toward him, grasping at his ankles with dark intent. The location had been chosen for its public nature, a busy restaurant on a thoroughfare that should have provided safety in numbers. However, the ordinary bustle of the lunch crowd felt distant and detached, as if Hoffa existed in a silent bubble separated from the living world. To the casual observer, he was just another man waiting for a business meeting. But the undercurrents swirling around him were treacherous. He was attempting to reclaim his throne, to seize back the presidency of the Union he had built from the ground up. But his return was not welcomed by everyone, particularly the dark forces of organized crime that had infiltrated the very structure of the labor movement. Hoffa had spent decades navigating the perilous waters between legitimate labor struggles and the violent underworld of the Mafia. He had shaken hands with mob bosses and brokered deals in smoke-filled backrooms where the fate of men was decided with a nod or a whisper. Now those same connections that had once bolstered his power were tightening around him like a noose. He had been released from prison 4 years earlier under the condition that he stay out of union politics until 1980. But James Riddle Hoffa was not a man to accept defeat or limitations. He was fighting to overturn that ban, unaware that his defiance was drawing him closer to a permanent silence. The meeting on this sweltering afternoon was supposed to be a peace conference, a chance to settle differences with Anthony Giacalone and Anthony Provenzano. These were men of violence, figures who commanded fear and respect in equal measure within the criminal underworld. Jacallone was a street boss for the Detroit Partnership, a man known for his immaculate dress and ruthless efficiency. Provenzano, known as Tony Pro, was a capo in the Genovese crime family, a volatile figure with whom Hoffa had a deep and bitter feud. The very idea that these men would meet Hoffa without malice seemed unlikely, yet desperation drove the former Union president to take the risk. As 2:00 came, and when the parking lot seemed to grow quieter, the ambient noise of traffic fading into a dull hum, Hoffa walked to a nearby payphone, his movements sharp and agitated. He dialed the number of his wife, Josephine, the one person in the world he trusted implicitly. When she answered, his voice was tight with frustration and a hint of fear that he tried to mask. He told her that his expected guests had stood him up a breach of protocol that was both insulting and alarming. He promised to be home soon, for stakes a mundane domestic detail that makes the horror of his subsequent disappearance even more poignant. This phone call would be the last time Josephine Hoffa ever heard the voice of her husband. It was the final tether connecting James Riddle Hoffa to the world of the living before it was severed forever. After hanging up the receiver, he returned to his car, the green metal hot to the touch. Witnesses later reported seeing him engaging in conversation with individuals in another vehicle, a maroon Mercury, that had pulled up beside him. The exchange appeared intense, but not violent, a negotiation taking place on the precipice of doom. Then, as quickly as the car had arrived, it departed, taking with it the secrets of that afternoon. The hours that followed were a slow descent into nightmare for the Hoffa family. When James did not return for dinner, the worry that had been gnawing at Josephine turned into full-blown panic. It was unlike him to vanish without word, to leave his family in the dark. He was a creature of habit, a man who valued punctuality and communication with his loved ones above all else. As the sun set and darkness swallowed the Michigan landscape, the silence in the Hoffa household became deafening. The phone sat on the hook cold and silent, refusing to ring with the news they so desperately needed to hear. By the next morning, the disappearance of James Riddle Hoffa was headline news across the United States. Police officers swarmed the parking lot of the Machus Red Fox, searching for clues that might explain where the Union giant had gone. They found his green Pontiac unlocked and abandoned, a ghostly relic of the man who had driven it there. Inside, there were no signs of struggle, no bloodstains to tell a gruesome tale. It was as if he had simply stepped out of existence, plucked from the face of the earth by an invisible hand. The emptiness of the car mirrored the void that had opened up in the heart of the labor movement. The investigation that ensued was massive in scale, involving local police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and a legion of journalists hungry for a scoop. Every lead was chased down, every rumor investigated with fervent intensity. The authorities knew that the clock was ticking, and that in cases of abduction, the first 48 hours are critical. Yet the code of silence that governed the world of organized crime proved to be an impenetrable wall. Men who knew the truth kept their mouths shut, fearing the retribution that would surely follow any betrayal. The omerta was in full effect, shielding the guilty and leaving the innocent to wonder. Detectives turned their attention to the men Hoffa was supposed to meet, Anthony Giacalone and Anthony Provenzano. Both had rock-solid alibis, carefully constructed to withstand scrutiny. They were nowhere near the Machus Red Fox at the time of the disappearance, having made sure to be seen in public places, surrounded by witnesses. It was a classic mob tactic, a calculated maneuver to distance themselves from the wet work while ensuring the job got done. The investigators knew in their gut who was responsible, but proving it in a court of law was an entirely different challenge. The specter of corruption and fear loomed over the entire case. Whispers began to circulate about what had happened in those final moments. Theories ranged from the plausible to the absurd, each one adding a layer of myth to the tragedy. Some believed Hoffa had been taken to a nearby house where he was executed swiftly and without mercy. Others suggested he was driven to a rendering plant or a junkyard, his body disposed of in a way that would leave no trace. The most chilling stories spoke of him being buried in the foundation of a building or mixed into the concrete of a stadium, forever entombed within the infrastructure of the country he helped build. One particularly gruesome account involved a house in northwest Detroit owned by a known associate of the Mafia. Decades later, forensics teams would tear up the floorboards of this residence, searching for the DNA of the lost Union boss. They found traces of blood, a whisper of violence from the past. But it did not match James Riddle Hoffa. The house stood silent, guarding its secrets, watching as generation after generation tried to pry the truth from its wooden bones. It was a dead end, one of hundreds that would frustrate investigators and fuel the growing legend of the ghost of the Teamsters. The disappearance sent shockwaves through the Teamsters Union, creating a power vacuum that was quickly filled by those willing to play ball with the mob. The reformers who had hoped for Hoffa to clean house were silenced. Their dreams of a clean union crushed under the weight of fear. The message was clear and brutal. No one was untouchable, not even a man as powerful as James Riddle Hoffa. If they could take him in broad daylight from a public place, then nobody was safe. A pall of dread settled over the Union halls, a cold shadow that lingered for decades. Years turned into decades, and the mystery of the disappearance only deepened. James Riddle Hoffa was legally declared dead in 1982, 7 years after he vanished. It was a bureaucratic formality, a piece of paper that confirmed what everyone already knew in their hearts. But without a body, there was no closure, no grave to visit, no final resting place for a man who had been larger than life. His spirit seemed to linger in the collective consciousness, a restless ghost demanding justice that would never come. The lack of a corpse allowed the imagination of the public to run wild, creating a folklore that blurred the lines between history and horror. The infamous confession of Frank, the Irishman Sheeran, added another layer to the macabre tale. On his deathbed, Sheeran claimed to be the one who pulled the trigger, the friend who betrayed Hoffa in his final moments. He described a house, a hallway, and 2 shots to the back of the head. It was a chilling narrative one that painted a picture of cold-blooded treachery. Yet even this confession was met with skepticism by some experts who viewed it as the ramblings of a dying man seeking notoriety. The truth remained elusive, dancing just out of reach, like a phantom in the fog. As the principal players in this dark drama aged and died, they took their secrets to the grave. The men who ordered the hit, the men who drove the car, and the men who disposed of the body passed into the void one by one. With each death, the chance of solving the mystery diminished, leaving behind only silence. The Mafia code held strong until the bitter end, a testament to the iron grip of fear and loyalty that defined that era. The graves of these gangsters are scattered across the country, silent monuments to a violent history that refuses to be fully unearthed. The Machus Red Fox is no longer there, having changed hands and names over the years. But the site remains a place of pilgrimage for those obsessed with the case. People visit the parking lot, standing on the spot where Hoffa was last seen, trying to feel the echoes of the past. They look for ghosts in the asphalt, sensing the lingering energy of a man who refused to go quietly. It is a modern-day haunted ground, a place where the mundane world intersects with the darkness of human nature. The wind that blows through the lot seems to carry the faint sound of a slamming car door. Psychics and mediums have visited the area, claiming to sense the confusion and anger of a spirit that was snatched away too soon. They speak of a sudden darkness, a blow from behind, and a feeling of profound betrayal. While many dismiss these claims as superstition, they add to the atmospheric dread that surrounds the Hoffa mystery. It reinforces the idea that some crimes are so heinous that they leave a psychic scar on the landscape, a wound that never fully heals. The ghost of James Riddle Hoffa has become part of the folklore of Detroit, a spectral figure warning of the dangers of ambition. The FBI files on the case are voluminous, filling countless boxes with reports, interviews, and surveillance logs. They are a testament to the obsession of law enforcement to solve the riddle, to close the book on a case that has embarrassed them for half a century. Agents spent careers chasing leads that went nowhere, digging up farms and draining ponds in a desperate search for evidence. The sheer magnitude of the effort highlights the importance of the man and the frustration of the failure. It is a story of the perfect crime committed in an imperfect world. In the cultural imagination, James Riddle Hoffa has become a symbol of the vanishing, the ultimate missing person. His name is invoked whenever someone disappears without a trace, a shorthand for the inexplicable. He is the patron saint of the lost, a figure who represents the terrifying possibility that we can be erased completely. The horror lies not just in his death, but in the obliteration of his physical form, the denial of his existence. To be murdered is a tragedy, but to be unmade is a horror that touches the deepest fears of the human soul. The impact on the Hoffa family was devastating, a slow, burning grief that never found resolution. James Philip Hoffa the son eventually followed in his father's footsteps, becoming president of the Teamsters. He walked the halls where his father once ruled, shadowed by the legacy of the Disappearance. Every day was a reminder of the loss of the unanswered questions that hung over the family like a dark cloud. They lived with the ghosts of the past, unable to fully move forward, while the mystery remained unsolved. Their resilience is a testament to the human spirit, but the pain remains woven into their history. Detroit itself serves as a grim backdrop to this story, a city that has seen the heights of industrial power and the depths of economic ruin. The decaying factories and abandoned neighborhoods of the city mirror the broken dreams and violent end of the Union era. The ghost of Hoffa walks these ruined streets, a phantom of a time when labor was king and the city roared with the sound of production. His fate is intertwined with the fate of Detroit, both rising to incredible heights before falling into shadow and mystery. The organized crime families of the mid-20th century were built on a foundation of blood and silence. They operated as a shadow government, enforcing their own laws and dispensing their own justice. The disappearance of Hoffa was a demonstration of their power, a signal that they could reach anyone, anywhere. It was a terrifying display of omnipotence that sent a chill through every level of society. The fact that they could get away with it, that they could maintain the secret for so long, speaks to the terrifying efficiency of their operation. Even today, new leads occasionally surface, sparking a flicker of hope that the body might be found. A tip from a dying mobster, a radar scan of a driveway, or a story passed down through generations can trigger a new search. The excavators arrive, the dirt is moved, and the world watches with bated breath. But time and again, the earth yields nothing but dirt and stones. The ground keeps its secrets, refusing to give up the dead. It is as if the land itself is complicit in the cover-up, protecting the dark history buried within. concept of the shallow grave in the woods or the oil drum in the river is a staple of mob lore. But the Hoffa case transcends these cliches. The total absence of physical evidence suggests a level of sophistication and planning that borders on the supernatural. It was a vanishing act performed on a global stage, a magic trick with a deadly conclusion. The perpetrators knew exactly what they were doing, ensuring that no bone or button would ever be found to incriminate them. They created a void where a man used to be. There is a psychological horror in the idea of the betrayal, the trusted associate luring the victim to their doom. Hoffa got into that car because he likely recognized the people inside, because he thought he was safe. The realization of the trap must have come too late in the final seconds before the darkness descended. That moment of recognition, that shift from safety to mortal danger, is the true climax of the horror story. It is the moment the ghost is born, created from the shock and terror of the ultimate double cross. Legacies are usually built on presence, on monuments and libraries and laws passed. But the legacy of James Riddle Hoffa is built on absence. He is defined by what is not there, by the empty space he left behind. This absence has a weight of its own, a gravity that pulls at the curiosity of historians and true crime enthusiasts alike. We are drawn to the void, compelled to stare into the darkness and wonder what looks back. It is a story without an ending, a sentence left unfinished for eternity. The rumors of his body being incinerated are perhaps the most plausible and the most disturbing. If true, it means there is nothing left to find, no DNA to identify, no remains to bury. He was turned into smoke and ash scattered on the winds of Michigan. This elemental destruction is a form of purification for the killers, a way to wipe the slate clean. But for the victim, it is the ultimate indignity, a denial of the sanctity of the human form. It creates a restless energy, a spirit that cannot be grounded. As we look back at the summer of 1975, the image of James Riddle Hoffa waiting in the parking lot becomes a tableau of doom. The sun, the heat, the green car, and the pacing man form a picture that is burned into history. It is the moment before the fall, the last breath of an era. The darkness that swallowed him is the same darkness that lurks at the edge of all our lives, the sudden and irrevocable change that can happen in an instant. The ghost story is not just about him. It is about the fragility of our own existence. The Machus Red Fox incident remains a cautionary tale about the price of power and the dangers of dancing with the devil. Hoffa believed he could control the forces he aligned. With that, he could use the mob without being used by them. His hubris was his, undoing a tragic flaw worthy of Shakespeare. The ghosts of his decisions came back to haunt him in the form of the men he trusted. It is a narrative that plays out across history. The powerful man brought low, by the very tools of his ascent. In the end, James, Riddle Hoffa, became more than a man, he became a myth. The mystery of his disappearance has outlived the reality of his life. He is a phantom of the opera of organized crime, a specter that haunts the labor movement and the American consciousness. The true horror is not in the violence of his death, but in the silence that followed. It is a silence that screams a void that echoes. And as long as the mystery remains unsolved, the ghost of Jimmy Hoffa will continue to wait in that parking lot, forever checking his watch for a meeting that will never happen.